Okay, good evening everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to this evening's webinar. Tonight we're looking at the topic of the do's and don'ts of county teams. So this is part of the county leadership programme for all county executive members and people involved in county boards. So it's looking at that angle of the county teams, and I know there's a lot of counties at the minute either putting teams in place or getting ready to put teams, so hopefully this is a good timing for it. My name is Lynn Savage, National Development Manager with Ladies Football, and tonight I'm joined with Niall Mulryan, who's National Development Officer with Ladies Football. So you have a mixture of the Louth accent and the Tyrone accent tonight, although as a Louth woman I should be happy we have a Tyrone man this week with Mickey Hart, so we might get somewhere. So speaking of county teams, we're going to get started. What we're going to look at tonight, and at any stage throughout this, please feel free to put a question in the Q&A function, and Niall will go through any questions. We may ask you to type stuff in the chat, and we'll have a few polls as well. So we're going to keep it good and engaging. But we would say for the Q&A, obviously the topic tonight is the do's and don'ts of county teams. So just that your questions are relevant to that topic, because we have a number of different webinars coming up which may answer other queries, but we'll keep to the topic tonight in relation to the do's and don'ts of county teams. So what we're looking at is the selection of management teams, how you set solid foundations then in relation to how you liaise with each other, and then communication is obviously a big part of the role throughout the year. And when we're talking about management teams, we're not just talking about the adult team. This is your under 14s, your 16s, your minors, your adults. So all of your management teams that you're going to put on board. So we're going to kickstart off first by a question with yourself. And all we want to know is, do you have your county management teams in place for 2021? Just so that we see what basic people we have with us. So Niall's going to put up a poll there, and you're going to click yes or you're going to click no. How's it going there, Niall?
Yes, we've 19 out of 23 responses there. We have no is 58% and 11 people, and then we have 8 people who've said yes, 42%.
Okay, so there's a good mix there as to who has and hasn't. So what we'll see is, you'll see when we go through the next few maps, you'll actually see from that different steps that you're going to do along the way. So you can see where you fit into that map at the minute. So the number one thing we'd say to you when you're looking for your county management team is to remember your number one role is looking after your players. So this quote, I think, is apt for us to start with. Somewhere behind the athlete you've become and the hours of practice and the coaches who have pushed you is a little girl who fell in love with the game and never looked back. Play for her. So when Mia Hamm was talking about this, she was very much talking about if she didn't have the right coaches at the right ages, she would have fell out of love for the sport and she never would have got to where she was. So this is really important for yourselves at a county executive level. A coach that goes in at adult level isn't necessarily the right type of coach for an under 14 team or an under 16 team. So getting the right coach at the different levels is extremely important. So that's what we're going to try and help you with tonight as well, a little bit around the selection of your coaches. And this research was actually done with our own players a number of years ago, when we did ask who was the key influencers and how important they were. And you'll see there the coaches, 92% stress the importance of a coach. So that just shows you how important it is that you select the right people in with the right teams, because they're a key influencer in keeping girls involved. And if you look at this very brief pathway for a county player, at the minute, for a club player, for a county player, but even if you think of our under 14 teams, there's 12, 13, 14-year-olds on those under 14 teams. And we're hoping in an ideal scenario that they're going to be still playing adult football, which could be 30 plus years they're still in the team. So if you think about that, we're asking them maybe to commit to a county team for 15, 16 years. It's a long time. And what we do want is to have more players and better players here. So if we can put the right people in place at all these grades the whole way up, the better chance we have of getting those more players and better players by the time we get to the top of the pathway. So that's what we want to think about tonight. How do we get the right people? And something I'd stress even to yourselves as well is, it can be good if, I know the restrictions are a little bit hard at the minute to get people into rooms, etc. But even at some stage during the year, that you actually get the mentors of all these teams in one room, because the aim of the under 14, 16 minor manager in particular is to get players that easily will slot into your adult team. So there should be building blocks that what's kind of expected at each of these county teams, and then they come easier slotted into your adult team. So just to keep that in mind as we go through these few slides. So the steps that we're looking at in relation to getting your county management teams, you're identifying the vacant roles. So for some, you might have managers staying on, so you don't need to look for those, but what is the vacant roles? Clear role descriptions, which we're going to look at. We're going to look at advertisements and how you do it, the application and interview process, the selection, the agreement you need to put in place. And even if you have mentors in place currently, you still, if you haven't got a proper agreement with them, you need to put that in place. Budgets, which is a big thing for county management teams and the executive, ongoing communication and review, and then of course your end of year review that you're going to do with them. So we'll touch a little bit on each of these as we go along. So the reason we're doing this is hopefully we're looking and talking at the end of next year, and we're asking your relationship with your county mentors, how was it? And we're hoping that you're all going to say it's like this, that all the cogs worked brilliantly, they all were smooth, there was no issues, that there was a little bump, it was just a matter of putting a bit of oil in to get it going again. So hoping that this is the way the cogs were moving for your team, and all the little guidelines we'll give you tonight are to try and help that to happen, to get over and those little bumps. Because if you don't, this is what you could be facing. You could be hitting the rapids from here till the end of next December or September or whenever it is your teams are involved. So you want to try and avoid the rapids as much as possible. And the way you do that is to put all the steps in place initially to make it a lot easier to overcome those rapids during the year. So the first step of those rapids and avoiding them is actually getting the right people in place in the first place. So a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is on our website in a lot more detail. So if you see there on our website, the LGFA hub, and you go into counties and you'll see loads of different documents there that's to help you in relation to selection of managers. So role descriptions, application forms, sample interview questions, sample interview score sheets, selection criteria, sample agreements, sample budgets. So there's absolutely loads of information there that you can help. And the key word being sample with them all, because you then tweak them to your needs in your county, which is most important. But we're going to go through these in detail, but just so that you know they're there is really important. So the first of those is the manager's role description, because you can't advertise something when you don't know what you're looking for. So we've purposely left this in nice small writing, don't worry. And the reason being, it's not for you to take this. You need to take this to what you want that manager role description to be. So if it's an under 14 manager, if it's an adult manager, what are you looking for? So the minimum experience required is the stuff that they have to have. So is it the coaching qualifications they have to have? Obviously they have to be Garda vetted or access and I check. That's a minimal. The code of behaviour, the safeguarding. But you put in there the things that they definitely have to have in your minimum. And then the skills and attributes, and then the duties. So what is the duties of that mentor going to be, that manager going to be? So as I said, these are all on the website, but you need to build these to the needs of your team. And that's what you're going to advertise with. So it's very clear when I'm being asked to take the under 16 team and I'm him in hand, not sure whether I'm going to do it. This gives me real clarity as to what my role is going to entail. And that can differ from county to county, because if you're saying, listen, our sole purpose is to go and win the under 16 All Ireland this year, versus a county who might be saying, well, our sole purpose is all those under 16s are going to be playing minor next year, are going to slot into the senior. There might be a little twist in the type of coaching, etc. that you want. So that's where you're building it to your needs of your county. And that, neither's wrong. It's whatever the needs of your county is. After you have the role description, you then need an application form. So there's a sample application form up on the website, but again, you're building it into the needs of your county. So on the sample one we have there, you'll see that it's asking the key questions for the minimum experience. So your details, your code of ethics, your coaching qualifications, your management experience. And there's even a key thing in there in relation to your references. So maybe there's teams they've been with before, because some people can talk a good talk, but at least if you chat to a reference, it can be good to see, well, what was their background before. And also you can ask them for things. So if you look at point 10 there, you can ask for things like, we want a budget submitted in relation to how much you think the team is going to cost, with you over it for the year. And we'll have a sample of that in a second, and the proposed management teams. And for some mentors, they might leave some of them blank, saying, I'm willing to work with the county board to see who the ex-officer is or whatever. So that's okay as well. but just that you have real clarity in relation to your application form. And as I said, all of these are on the website. Then comes the big one, the interview. And for the interview, who will be on the interview panel? And yes, I know there's probably some counties who say, listen, we don't go through this whole process. We actually go headhunting, for instance. And that's fine, but it's still the same thing in relation to, you need complete transparency as to why these people were selected. And that's what this process is talking about. So either way, make sure you have transparency as to how they were. So if you are doing an interview, who will be on the interview panel is a question that we get asked a lot. So we'd say is at least 2, but a maximum of 5. And obviously in current circumstances, it's going to depend on how many is allowed indoor, for instance, or for some, I know some interviews have already taken place on Zoom or Teams or whatever else, because the mentor was able to present via that also. So it's up to you what method, or is it face-to-face or is it online? The example of who could be on it, perhaps the chairperson and another executive member. So you might be looking at a max of 2 from the executive. A good idea, and people have used a lot, is a former player. And actually what has been very interesting is the amount of counties who've used a former player but not from their own county, because they seen it as a former player still knows what a county player is looking for, but they had no maybe connection to a certain coach within the county. And an independent person can always be good, because maybe if it's between 2 or 3 people in the executive and you can't get a decision, the independent person isn't necessarily looking at what club they're with. They're actually looking at how the interview, how they performed, what was in their application. So that's an example. Again, it's up to you who you pick, but that's an example of who you can put on your interview panel. When you do your interview then, it's important that you select the same questions to be asked to all candidates. So it's not, I'm going to take Niall and I'm going to ask him the hardest questions possible. And then, do you know what? I really want Mary to get this, so I'm going to ask her 2 nice, easy questions, make her look good. So it's make sure that the same questions are asked, so that there's clear selection criteria. If you want them to present on a topic, you can also forward that topic in advance and ask them to present on it as to why they want the job or what they're going to do with the team. You can pick a topic that really, and that can be quite interesting, because you really get to see the background and why they want the job. And then make sure you have an interview score sheet, because if Niall comes back wanting to know why he didn't get the job, you have to be able to give transparency and clarity as to where Niall lost marks and why he didn't get the job. So it's really important in relation to that to have an interview score sheet in place too.
Yeah, and I suppose, Lynn, just on another point to that, like at the end of the day, like we want the best people for the roles as well. But just on that point, like if there is a challenge, that you are totally transparent. In no way, sometimes, you know, counties aren't maybe doing this way. You're maybe headhunting, but if there is some kind of discrepancy or some kind of challenge to why they get the post, you know, you have this then to back you up.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Niall. So when you get the right person then, and this is something that some counties skip, is the signed agreement. And at times we get a phone call where maybe there's a bit of an issue between the county executive and the management team, and we're being asked to come in and fight a fire. And in a lot of cases, it's because there wasn't a signed agreement. So one didn't know the expectation of the other. So this is really important, because at the end of the day, this person is technically an unpaid employee as such of the county executive. You've taken them on board to look after a team, but at the end of the day, they are still answerable to you. So there's no separate entities occurring in relation to these teams. They are all under the one umbrella of your county. So the signed agreement, as we said, there's samples of it up on the website as well. Some of the areas that's on it will be who they're reporting to. So who is the person that they are reporting to, or is there a named people? Is it the county executive? What will their duties and responsibilities be? So real clear things in relation to what's expected of them, so that at least they know, or you don't come to them towards halfway through the year saying you haven't done X, Y, or Z, when that person didn't even know they were supposed to be doing X, Y, or Z. Or the other way around, they do something they weren't supposed to do, not knowing that it was in it. So getting those clear duties and responsibilities. The length of the term as well is really important, because again, that's somewhere that some people come up with a crux of maybe a mentor not wanting to leave and saying, no, my term's not up, but you didn't actually have a clear clarity in how long their term was. And that doesn't mean you can't extend people's terms, etc., or interview them again. That's not at all. But it just means that there's clarity in what the length of the term is. The safeguarding conduct vetting, making sure all of that's in it, that it's done, it's compulsory, it's by law. Expenses, if there's going to be any sort of expenses, how are they dealt with? So in a lot of cases, there might be travel expenses going to gains for the manager, or whatever way that is. With the, obviously they can't be paid, but there is cases where a mentor may get travel expenses if there's distances. You might be taking in a mentor from outside your county in relation to your team. The release of players as well, and this is where there can be a bit of friction around, maybe there's county championship, club championship, and the manager's not releasing the players. So this should be in it, as in there will be no club championship 5 days or whatever it is prior to a game. So it's very clear in relation to this as to when players are released, when they're not released. So that, because all that happens is the player gets caught in the middle. So just making sure that this is really clear. And even on the release of players, that could be between teams. So maybe you have a really good under 16 who's also on the minor team. So having real clarity in relation to the release of players in that as well. The dress code, so when they're on the sideline, and you might think that's a little bit petty, but they're representing you. So that they are wearing your gear, they're representing you. The Bannister might be on the back of it or whatever, but they are representing you, and that's really important. Disciplinary procedures, so having stuff in there that what happens if something goes wrong? You're hoping nothing goes wrong, but what happens if it does? You have to have it in there as to how it will be dealt with, and the same in relation to grievance procedure. And that works both ways, because maybe they want to get out of the contract as well. So just making sure that there's complete clarity and it's signed by both parties is really important. This is just a sample of a budget, and I know some people will be on here going, geez, there's far more than that in our budget, or there's less than that, but this is just to show you how it would be. So if you were asking them to present a budget, it could be something like this, where they actually have all the areas, and nobody knows exactly what's going to have to be spent. And I always say, aim for the start. You'll see a slide coming up on that. So we all want to win the All-Ireland. So that's the worst case scenario. That's the most we're going to have to spend. So if we have something left over because we got knocked out before that, that's great. It helps carry on till the year after. But at least if we know what it's going to cost, it really helps. So you might get them to put in what's going to be needed. So between equipment and personnel, training sessions. And the reason of the list of potential funding sources, initiatives, is some managers may come saying, okay, the InterCounty Grant, which we'll touch on in a second, I have that to spend on certain areas. That's the areas I think is going to be covered in it. I have a link that I feel we as a county board can chat with for a catering partner who could help us in relation to refreshments, or a bus partner, just so that you can clearly see the whole way down it, how much this could potentially cost, that you're going to link with a licensee and sponsor maybe to get the gear covered. So it's having a look at the overall budget, and then, well, as a squad, what I'm going to tell the players when they buy into what I'm doing, we're going to raise 10,000 ourselves for this team, but just having real clarity, because you then need to sit with the mentor and yourselves and say, okay, there's 34,000. I know that seems like a lot, but it's throwing stuff out there in relation to county teams. How's that going to be raised? So at least people know at the start, okay, as an executive, as a county board, we've the capability of raising this amount. This is how we're going to go after X, Y, and Z section of this with somebody else. And then, okay, we need to actually increase the amount of fundraising needs to be done by 2,000-3,000, whatever it is. So just if that's done at the start of the year, it makes life much easier then later on in the year. And this should be for every team, because what happens to you as a county executive is if you focus on one team and you think you have the budget done for the year, and all of a sudden you realise there's 3 other teams you have to do the same for. So it's better, we'd rather know, okay, it's going to take this to run all 4 teams. Could we go after it together as a county for a major fundraiser that covers all our teams? And this is the amount that's going to be put into each team. So that's just a sample of the budget that could potentially be used. I touched on the InterCounty Grant, and that has been in place for the last number of years. So it was a joint submission from ourselves, Camogie, and the WGPA to the government to look for money for our county. So anyone who's been involved in county executive already will know that that grant has been there. There was 9,000 this year that can be claimed. I know some counties are sending that in at the minute. The total will be confirmed annually, so we don't have any confirmation on that, and we won't have till the new year. There's a little bit of a delay with COVID on everything, so we're waiting to hear from the government on that. But it is essential for the county executive, the manager and the WGPA rep to agree together what's going to go into these sections. And you can clearly see the sections there that can be claimed for. And there's a lot more details on that. So we'll have a separate workshop in relation to the government grant with ourselves and Camogie before that. But it is important that the government granted assist costs, but it doesn't fully cover them. But it is there. And it, as I said, it was 9,000, but it depends. We have no idea what it's going to be next year. The other part that was in that for the last few years was the player health check, where your whole county squad could actually get a health check done. And there was a lot of positive feedback from that. So that's the initial steps of getting your mentors and putting them in place. But then after that is the solid foundations. So to set your solid foundations, it is really important that you have regular meetings between stakeholders. So all key stakeholders meeting at the start of the year to agree what is the standard we want to have for this team. So what is it that we expect? It's important that everyone believes in the system, understands it and experiences it, so that we're not all going off in different divides. So we're all buying into this one package of what we're trying to do. And continually plan, do and review as a group throughout the year. So every time, and if you look at the diagram, every time you plan, you do, you act, you check, your new standard gets higher that you start from every single time. And that's what you really want to see. As I said, this is with all your age grades. And it's for yourselves, and it means that you have extreme clarity as to what's happening with your county team as well. But over time, you'll really start to see the improvement of everything. And that's what we're saying, even if you can get your mentors meeting together, all of a sudden, the gap going from one team to the other becomes less and less and less, because everyone knows what's in practice at the age grade below them or the age grade above them. So for yourselves to build solid foundations, first of all, designate a county executive point of contact for each team. That's really important, that there is one point, that there's not 10 people that the county manager can go to. So maybe you have 4 members of the executive. One might be with the under 14s, one with the under 16s, one with the minors, one with the adults, or maybe it's the one person, but at least you know who that designated point of contact is. And that's extremely important. That the mentors have all signed their code of conduct, that they sign up to the procedure and they know what their responsibilities are, because they're representing your county. And it's remembering, if anything happens disciplinary wise around it, will fall back on you in the county. So that's where it's really important that you have all these signed. That the players have a code of conduct completed with their mentors then. So the mentors will actually sit and come up with that, especially as the teams get older. And I think even all of them under 14s, 16s can really come up with that code of conduct together as well, that they really get real buy into it. But it reminds the players then that they are also representing the county. So if they're doing something and they're wearing your county gear, everyone's going to know about it. So it's really knowing what the code of conduct is for them also. Agree steps for any orders required for each team. And this again is something we've had to firefight a few times. Any orders, whether it's gear or equipment renting, should only be ordered by the county executive. So if, for instance, O'Neill's is the people who supply your gear, you should be letting O'Neill's know, listen, the only person who will order from my county is this person, or 2 people, whatever's named. Because what you don't want is you get a bill from somewhere at the end of the year that you didn't know there was 10,000 worth of stuff ordered from, and it's billed back to your county executive. So knowing where it is, and it's letting your mentors know that, but also it's no harm letting the suppliers know it as well, just so that you're not getting hit with a bill you didn't know about. And that has happened. So this is just giving you a few tips for what has happened previous. But no, if the mentors know that from the start, that's where it's important. Again, agreeing the protocols for fundraising, and this is extremely important. There is only one county executive. So there cannot be separate bank accounts for separate teams or money held separately for teams. There is one. They all fall under the umbrella of your county. That is really important. And even I know there is some managers, in fairness, might have some great contacts of their own that say, listen, Joe Bloggs doesn't want to get involved in such and such a fundraiser, but he's willing or she's willing to give me €500. That's fine. They can give the mentor the €500, but that €500 goes into that account. And yes, it could designate back against the budget, which is fine, but it still has gone into that one bank account that's in it. And that has to give extreme clarity too. because remember, all of these accounts and everything are so, so important. And the final one there, agreeing protocols for overlap with other teams. So this can be maybe a minor player who's on the adult team, an under 16 who's on the minor team, an under 14 who's on the under 16s also. Agreeing this at the start of the year, because at least then the player doesn't get caught in the middle. If there's games on the same week, or there's what's expected of them training wise, that they're not training every night. And the same with dual players. And what we would say in relation to the dual players, yeah, we 100% encourage it. There are people saying you don't encourage it, but also you need to be aware it is not physically possible to always avoid the clash with a dual player, especially now when people are looking for club windows. It means the county windows getting shorter. So yes, we work with Camogie trying to get over that there's little overlap, but for instance, there could be quarterfinals over 2 weekends. You have no way of knowing at the start of the year where a county is going to fall in which of those quarterfinals is a prime example. So that is where it's up to you as a county to say, if we are having dual players, what is the expectations? If it happens, if there is a clash and it can't be done, how are we going to deal with it? Because it tends to fall back on the governing body, but you also have to know that at the start of the year, your manager, your players are aware of it. So as I say, we do encourage it, but it's not always possible. So when people sign up at the start of the year, they need to be aware this could potentially happen. How are we going to deal with it? And that's not calling for strikes or anything else. It's how are we going to deal with it? Are we going to play? Which team do we play for? Permission forms is the other thing that you need to make sure is signed. So for underage players, and you can build it all into one form to make it easier. Travel permission form, overnights if they were needed, photography, text messaging, anti-doping consent form. So if you have an underage player on an adult team, if they're at a championship game, they do not need a parent there. If Sport Ireland are there and the anti-doping's there, if their number gets selected, they can go through it. So that consent form is there. Data protection consent as well. And then the same in relation to adult players, because sometimes we think the permission forms are just needed for underage players, but for adult players, if you're doing fitness tests and etc., that you get the data protection consent for those also. So just making sure those permission forms are done with each of your teams. So for pre-season, and then we'll move into the mid-season. For pre-season, you want to make sure you have that clarity of purpose with your county teams. So at the initial meeting, what will that look like? So instead of just turning up and not sure what's going to happen, what do you want the meeting to look like? What's your objectives out of it? Set the standard, agree the guidelines. So start on the right foot. What does it mean to represent this team, the purpose? And I can guarantee when you chat it out, both yourself and the mentors actually have the one purpose that you want for the teams, which is great because that's the perfect foot to start on. We're all trying to achieve the same thing. What words would you like associated with your county going forward? So what are your values? And you'd love to think that the values are the same across all your teams, that's the values of your county. That's what you want to come out of it. How are you going to achieve the above, and what must we do to reach this aspiration? So what approach are we going to take? So this could be a meeting where you have your county mentors together. It can be separate meetings with each team. But what's good about it is by the end of it, you as a county executive and the mentors clearly know your purpose, your values and your approach. And you know each other's opinion on these, which is really important. What do we need to do differently? And what are our accepted behaviours? Because keep going back to the core thing, which is at the start of this, the players. Keeping the players at the centre of everything. What is the accepted behaviours? As I said, you can meet them separately and then together, there is no issue in it. But know your purpose, your values, and what approach you're going to take for the year before you leave that pre-season meeting. As we said with the budgets and everything else, shoot for the stars. You may not get to the stars, but you may get to the moon. So in other words, at the start of the year, there's nobody turns up and says, geez, we've no chance of winning anything this year. Everybody's out there with ambition. And I know I've heard a few people say, oh, they didn't really want to win that game. I have yet to meet a county player who doesn't want to win a game. They're training their socks off, and there is none of them do not want to win a game. So aim that you're going to be in the All-Ireland, and everything after that then will work out. So if your budget was for that, well, and we didn't spend it all. That's fine. We now have that to start off next year, and we don't have to start off the same foot we did the year before. So shoot for the stars. Think of everything as the best chance you're going to get there. So we're going to get you to do a little bit of work here for a second. One of the key people with your management team is the female liaison officer. So they're compulsory. You must have a female liaison officer with every one of your teams. So that's by rule, has to happen. So we want you just to write down there, what do you think is the role of the female liaison officer? So if you want to type a few things into the chat, and Niall's going to relay them back there.
Yes, we have nothing yet, Lynn. Can you give it?
Nice and quiet.
Yeah, so the go-to person for players.
Perfect, yeah, really good one. And that's so important. And it's funny, you meet a lot of county teams and they'll say managers have come and gone, but the female liaison officer has been there forever. But it's nearly like they become nearly a mother figure for a lot of people, and that's a really important one.
Yeah, so we have good communication between county board and county team to address any concerns for players, point of contact between the executive and the team, communicate between especially a male manager and female players, keeping communication open in between team and executive, a female voice for players, a listening ear for players, a support for the younger and new players in the panel, to look after players, as Lynn says, a mother figure. I see somebody said to become COVID officer now as well. I don't know if that's...
Some of them have been put in there, yeah.
An independent person to deal with players and to go between trainers and players where needed. We'd one there as well to organise the dressing room and sub-slips. I don't know, what's your thoughts on that, Lynn?
Yeah, so again, it depends on the clarity of the role you give that person at the start of the year, but a lot of the really good stuff there, the communication between bodies, so you can see communication is key. And yeah, if it tends to be the county secretary that's there to do the sub-slips, but if they've designated that role to the female liaison officer, that's different, but obviously making sure they're registered and everything because they're filling in official slips in relation to it. So that's where the role may change slightly. And this is just some of the things here that we actually have in relation to these. I think most of these were covered, but they are an extremely important person. So the female presence on the management team, as was mentioned, the liaison between the county team and the county board, and that will be with the link you've designated on the county board. And that doesn't mean the manager can never talk to somebody in the county board, or the players can never talk. Of course they can. It just means that this is where the clear communication comes from. Liaison between the players and the management team. And you're right, that listening ear, and we done some female liaison officer training over the past 2 years, and it's been really good chatting to them. And they've said some of the best conversations or some of the best parts of their role have been standing beside a player on a physio table, for instance, and literally that player is just chatting about life. So little things like that, they're a listening ear. Ensure the training and training methods are appropriate for females in the target age group. Now, by this, we don't mean that they're an expert coach. Like, it's not every little thing going, well, that shooting drill was poor, I'm going to report that, it's not what has happened. But for instance, if they were training and for a number of nights in a row they see players being sick, for example, that is not right. Like, you might have it one night, or you might have an odd night, a player's not feeling great, but if you see it constantly going with players, well, that's not appropriate training methods. So that's what we mean by something extreme. Lifting weights they shouldn't be lifting, things like that. Ensure the code of ethics is adhered to, so all those forms we mentioned. The advisory resource, which we mentioned for the players. Monitor dropout from county teams, and that's important because sometimes a player will drop off a county team and you'll hear, well, that's their own loss, they're gone. But actually, it could have been one little thing that could have changed that made that player stay. So just to monitor that and see, okay, is there a reason why that player went? And in a lot of cases, it might be just it wasn't for them, or there was different things happening in life, but maybe there was something that could have been changed. They shouldn't be involved in selecting the team. When you think of all the stuff you're after mentioned there about a neutral person pretty much with the players and with the management team and everything, they lose that with a certain amount of players if they're involved in the selection of the team. And that is something that has come up a lot, and we've even had the chat with the female liaison officers in relation to it too. And then the female liaison officer can be key for communication with players. So ensure you have that correct person. And they are so, I cannot underestimate the importance of the female liaison officer in keeping players involved. So that's the reason why we put that in there. So even with your management team, making sure you get that right person for the female liaison officer is extremely important. And from the female liaison officer, communication is obviously a key part of that, which we have mentioned, but it's a key part for everyone. So for yourselves to the mentors, and the same the other way around. So we talked about the pre-season and chatting, but in season as well, it's so important that you continue having that communication, because they're representing your county. So continue to have it. Communication is key. It's the heart of great teamwork. You should have communication well and often. So there's nothing worse when you hear something off the grapevine from somebody else when you didn't know it about your own team. It promotes the sharing of ideas. It asks for feedback and be open to constructive criticism. So you'll see when we talk about the hot wash meeting in a second, but there may be a leadership group, for instance, with your team. So having a little chat with them, touch base with them and see how's things going. Is there things that need to change? Is there anything we can help you further with? Monthly hot wash meetings with the full group. So that can be the county executive with your management, or the point of contact with your management, discussing what's going well, what can we do better, and vice versa. Because there's nothing worse when you get to the end of the year and as an executive you felt like you've busted yourself making sure everything was there, and then you're hit slap bang with something going, well, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. So why couldn't that communication have happened throughout the year? So it just has that little chat to make sure everything's very clear throughout the year, and it makes life a lot easier. And as we said, it avoids those rapids that we talked about earlier. So having it that they can say what's working well with you, and the same the other way around. And the regular peer review, so helping the county excel. So as I said, those chats, so if you don't want a formal thing like the hot wash meetings, it could be just a chat with each other around what's one thing we're doing well, what's one bit of advice of things we can improve to do further. So keep having those chats and open that communication. When you're looking at your end of season, so this is important too. So even if you're on a 2-year term or 3-year term, you still need to review the end of the season. So of all the things we did in the last 6 months or 8 months or 9 months or whatever it is, what are we most proud of? So what's the things that we really done well? And this is both as a management team and as an executive, because you're all under the one umbrella. So what did we do well? What else? Make a list. Make a list of the good stuff. How did we manage all that? Because if you've done stuff well, put it in a jar and put a lid in it, because you want to be able to do it next year too. So knowing what you've done well. What are our strengths? What's the difficulties or the problems, and how did we tackle them? Did we do it successfully? Again, we're learning, we're getting better. We're going to keep the stuff we done well. We're going to learn from the stuff we need to change. How did we do it? What was helpful to get the best out of the team in the last year? And write down what you specifically appreciated about the management team or the county executive and how they helped. And what that helps as well is maybe that management team is stepping away, but if you can get all those learnings, it makes the next management team coming in a lot easier. So have that end of season review of the purpose. Did you keep on track with what you said the purpose was at the start of the year? Because if you didn't, something got missed in there in the in-between. For effective communication throughout the year, make sure it's clear, that anything you want is presented clearly. There's no mix-up in anything. It's concise. If you have something to say to either the management team to you, but if you need to say it to the management team, don't go round about the same topic for 5 minutes because you're afraid to get to the crux of it. Be concise, straight up, what's the message you want to deliver. Have accurate information, that it's complete, that it's all the information. Be courteous, so be polite and non-threatening, avoid the conflict, and then constructive. So positive, avoiding being critical and negative. So being constructive on both sides. Using these though will really help your conversations and keeping things open and getting everyone working together, which is really, really important. So just, we're literally coming towards the end, because as we said, a lot of the stuff we have for you is on our website as well, and we didn't want to completely bombard you with a load of information, and we'll have the presentation available for people on YouTube as well to watch back. But we are asking you, there's a number of scenarios here, and these are just a few of them. There may be much more onto these, but these are potential ones that have come up in counties. And we're not going to ask you to type in the chat or anything, but we would say to you is, These are things you should be thinking about and discussing with your management teams at the start of the year, and not waiting until they happen and then not knowing how to deal with them. So if these happen, what are we going to do? So we mentioned this briefly earlier. The senior county team has a match on Sunday, while the county minors have a match on Saturday. 2 players play on both. What happens? No point in waiting till it actually happens. Have a system in place at the start of the year. This is the protocol in relation to it. A student nutritionist offers to give sessions to the team. What do you do? Okay, the key word in there being the student or the qualified. Okay, so you're given, remember, it's you that's offering this information to the players, to make sure the information that you're given is the correct information. The coach of a men's team offers to take the squad for a session. What do you do? So again, having a look at this, maybe there's nothing wrong with the coach of the men's team. Maybe they've coached ladies football before, they have a background, but maybe they're renowned for literally just running and lifting and stuff that's not applicable to your players and causing injuries. So just have a little bit of a check about what they're going to do. It's not always a bad thing. In fact, at times it can be a great thing to have a different voice coming in. The manager is looking to take the team on a training weekend. What steps do you take? I think with us all being locked down in COVID, we'd all love to go on any weekend at the minute. But if they're looking to go on the training weekend, especially you don't want to hear about it happening afterwards. So what is the steps in relation to, we talked about the forms already, but also the funding. Where are they going? What activities are they going to do? Because is some of those activities not going to be covered by any insurance? So looking at all the things in relation to that training weekend. A mentor is continuously using foul language to players. What do you do? So again, that is the importance of your code of conducts at the start of the year, because they're representing your county. They're wearing your badge. And finally there, a player approaches you saying the manager is bullying her. What do you do? So again, okay, you hope it's never going to happen, but at least by having all these questions thought about before, and there's loads more possible scenarios, it just makes life easier by the time it actually happens. So have a protocol is the main thing for any potential scenario that might come up. That's a key thing in relation to this. So what we're asking you is, imagine that we return here next year and we're incredibly enthusiastic about the past year. COVID has gone and be the most enthusiastic we'll definitely be, but that we've all our competitions played and everything else. Apart from the competitions being played or you win All Ireland, type in the chat there maybe 1 or 2 of the things of what would have happened. And it's been enthusiastic about how you work together with your management team. What would you be excited by? So just type in 1 or 2 things there and Niall's going to feed back on those as well. Oh, very quiet again, Niall, are they?
Yeah, so we're just waiting for the flood to get open here, but we've nothing yet.
And it is important in these scenarios that you do look back at and see what did we do right, because there's always some great stuff done.
We're looking at retaining the full team for next year. That the
Brilliant.
girls enjoyed the experience.
Super. And that would be down to having the right mentors in place.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important for yourselves to have something that you're going to measure and look back. So these are questions you could ask yourself in that group meeting at the end.
With some more healing, good fundraising within the teams, that the girls were very happy with the management and lots of new players were keen to commit, that you had positive communication with all the management team, building on the good things, avoiding the things that didn't go so well. Mags said she'd love to hear the players enjoyed the year and will be back playing the following year. And another one came in, new sponsors.
Brilliant, yeah. And they're all great things that you'd love to see happening along the way. So it is important, as I said, when you sit and you ask those at the end, ask yourself those questions. What would we say happened? What would we be excited by? But the key thing I'd say is, without putting in those initial proper foundation blocks, the contracts, the proper clarity of the roles, that's when you see more rapids. And trust me, we've had to deal with a few. Whereas when all that is very clear for both mentors and for the county executive at the start of the year, it makes life so much easier for the rest of the year.
Yeah, we have a few more then coming in, just that we help to develop players that are ready to take the next step, being able to freshen up the panel by bringing in new players to the panel, learning from any mistakes, developing 2 or 3 of last year's top minors with game time and a distinct progression curve. I've been enthused about how well monthly meetings went with all the managements. Great numbers turning up for squads and trials, driving better standards in clubs. That the players have gelled as a team and have a good relationship with the team as a whole. And then that we have a really good, happy, united team and management, proud to play for the county and raring to go for the following year.
Brilliant, brilliant. And that is, like, that pride in the jersey is a massive thing. I mean, I played at my own county for many years, and it's not that we had success every year, but we had massive pride and unity, which I think is coming across a lot of what you're saying there, Niall, which is good, that unity of purpose. So before we just go to any questions you might have at the end, we're just going to put in one more poll there for you. Will you now put further steps in place with your county management teams? And I know some of you already have the management teams in place and you might have these steps, but just from looking at some of those, is there further steps that you're now actually going to put in place with your management teams? And thankfully, for the majority of counties, there's great steps in there, and that's what we said from the start, but it's just the little things that might help a few counties along the way.
Yeah, so we're nearly everyone returned so far, Lynn, but everyone so far has said yes, so it's 100% yes so far.
That's great. Yeah, and that's super. And as we said, you'll see tonight, there's nothing we said you have to do this, you have to. It's very much about tweaking it for your county, which is really important because every county is so different, and your age grades. And trust me, even the little things like the agreements, you'll find a lot of the mentors and stuff will actually appreciate it because they have extreme clarity then from the start of the year. And like you hear about the agreements being done with the adult team, but maybe not with the underage, but actually they're all county mentors. So treating them all the same that way is really, really important. So I know, as we said, that was a bit of a whistle stop of a lot of information, but we didn't want to spend a lot of time going through those little agreement documents and stuff, which are there for you to read on our website. Feel free to go through any of those. But Niall, I don't know if anybody has any questions, feel free to fire them into the chat or the Q&A just in relation to your county teams. As I said, we will keep it specific to that topic tonight. So if there's any questions, we'll take them, and if not, then we'll start to wrap up for you.
Yes, there's a few in there so far, Lynn. One was just, will the webinar be available afterwards? From Niall, he said in PDF format, but I believe we're recording it, Lynn, aren't we?
Yeah, we're recording it, so we'll actually have it uploaded on our YouTube channel, hopefully this evening, if not tomorrow morning. Yeah,
there we go. We have one around just that, the government grant. Can counties in Britain claim from that, Lynn?
No, they can't. It is for the counties here. It's coming from the government here, so hence the breakdown of it. It's one of the conditions of it.
Yeah, okay. We've one around just that just clash of fixtures. Will the 5-day rule still apply next year?
Yeah, well, the 5-day rule is built into our official guide, so that's in it. I know a number of counties actually increase that themselves within their own counties, so some of them have that it's 10 days out from games. That's no problem. That's a minimum that's in the official guide, and obviously we don't know exactly what the master fixtures is going to be like yet, but when that's there, it'll probably give further clarity too.
Yeah, we've just a few more there. We've one, how do you deal with the situation where the county board backs the manager and postponing matches?
Yeah, well, what you have to remember is you are the county executive, so the county executive backing the manager postponing matches, I would say there was no agreement there at the start of the year if that's the case. Because if the agreement's there, everybody knows. Clubs know, players know, county mentors know, county executive know. This is the protocols in relation to the release of players, the postponement matches. It's all built in at the start of the year, and it stops any of that foray, as we said, where players get caught in the middle later on. So set that out at the start of the year, maybe for championship matches, how long before, etc. But it's built in at the start of the year, so there's no issue then thereafter.
Yeah, there's another one here. Just where would they find protocol on having underage players on county adult teams or panels?
Yeah, so there is no protocol. If an underage player, which can only be a minor, is the only age grade that's allowed to play an adult, when they're playing on an adult team, they're treated the same way as an adult. As I said, anti-doping, everything else. We've seen it this year. Even we went through that many different levels of COVID, up and down. But if a player was playing on an adult team, they're there as an adult, so a parent is allowing them be there, so they're there as part of that adult team.
Yeah, and we've just we've one or two more. Just should all management sign a code of conduct before being selected as a management team?
Yeah, well, to me, it's that you may offer the role to mentor, obviously, first, but then you're making sure that you have the copy of all that you need. So that could be coaching qualifications, their vetting, and it's a bit like a job. Sometimes you get offered a job, but on the condition your Garda vetting comes back clear or whatever it is. So the exact same relation to those, Niall, that they're all signed then before they're actually getting the official maybe contract signed, or the agreement, as I rather call it, rather than a contract.
Yeah, and that was really it, Lynn.
Perfect. That's great, everyone. Plenty of good questions there, which is really important. So thank you, everyone, for signing in tonight. I know this is just one of our county leadership series. I think the next one is in relation to fixture planning, that's coming up in December. So we encourage you to get your members signed up to that, and then we have more in the new year. So this is very specific for your county executive, and we're trying to meet the needs exactly as you want, which is important for us. So thanks a million, everyone, and we hope you enjoy it and you get some out of that. And thanks, Niall, for all the questions and information that you put through there as well. So good night, everyone, and stay safe.